am Anne, a 34-year-old single mother to my wonderful children, Lily and Jason. Growing up in an affluent family might seem ideal. But beneath the polished exterior of our mansion, favoritism consistently favored my sister, Diane. For years, I endured weekly Sunday dinners where my children and I were treated as lesser family members. However, last month, a simple takeout order became the tipping point that changed everything. My decision to finally stand up for myself stunned my entire family and transformed our lives forever. Before I share what happened that night, let me know where you are watching from and please hit the subscribe button. If you have ever had to confront toxic family members and want to understand how a takeout order could disrupt decades of family dynamics, you need to know what it was like growing up as the unfavored daughter. My parents, Richard and Eleanor Wilson, built a thriving real estate empire in Connecticut, amassing wealth most people only dream of. Our childhood home was a 7-bedroom colonial mansion with meticulously manicured gardens, a pool house, and staff quarters. Yet, all that luxury was accompanied by cold, conditional love. From the start, my sister Diane was the golden child. She was the spitting image of our mother, with perfectly styled blonde hair, green eyes, and a smile that could charm anyone. For years my senior, Diane quickly learned she could have anything she desired simply by asking. Her ballet recitals were mandatory family events. Her artwork was professionally framed and prominently displayed in the main hallway. Her academic achievements, even the minor ones, were celebrated with extravagant parties. I, conversely, was the practical, responsible one. My brown hair and hazel eyes resembled my paternal grandmother, whom my mother never particularly cared for. Although I excelled academically and won several scholastic competitions, my achievements were met with remarks like, "That's what we expect from you," or "Of course you did well. You have no distractions." There were no celebrations for my successes or special frames for my certificates. When it was time for college, Diane attended Yale with a generous monthly allowance despite her average grades. I earned a full academic scholarship to Columbia for education, yet I still faced comments about how teaching was a modest ambition for someone of my background. After college, the pattern persisted. Diane married Bradley, a finance executive from another affluent family, in a wedding that cost more than most people's homes. I met Thomas, a kind and hardworking architect, at a mutual friend's gathering. When we got engaged, my mother's first question was whether we would sign a prenuptial agreement, a concern she never raised with Diane. As adults, Diane continued to live a privileged life. She has never worked, instead focusing on charity galas and social clubs that allowed her to connect with other wealthy families. My parents purchased a starter home for her and Bradley as a wedding gift and continue to subsidize their lifestyle. Meanwhile, I built a career as an elementary school teacher, finding true fulfillment in nurturing young minds despite the modest salary. 3 years ago, my carefully built life unraveled when I discovered Thomas was having an affair with a coworker. The divorce was swift but painful, leaving me to raise our children largely alone. Thomas pays child support, but it is often late and insufficient. My parents could have offered support during this challenging time, but instead, they commented on how I should have worked harder to save the marriage and questioned why Thomas strayed. Despite these difficulties, I take great pride in providing for Lily and Jason. Lily, now 10, shares my love of books and spends hours drawing and writing stories. She is sensitive and thoughtful, always the first to notice when someone is upset. Jason, 8, is our little scientist, constantly asking questions about how things work and conducting experiments in our small kitchen. Both children are consistently polite, a trait numerous teachers have noted during parent conferences. The weekly Sunday dinner tradition at my parents' mansion began when Diane and I both had children, as my mother insisted that family should gather regularly. However, these dinners quickly became another setting for highlighting the disparities in how our children were treated. Diane's children, Zach, 12, and Madison, 9, arrive with the latest electronic gadgets and designer clothes. They interrupt adults, demand specific foods prepared just for them, and often break things with little consequence. In contrast, my children have learned to speak only when addressed at these gatherings, to accept whatever food is served without complaint, and to offer help with cleanup. Though their assistance is typically dismissed with a curt, "We have staff for that, dear." Subtle insults and passive-aggressive remarks have been constant at these dinners. "That top is so practical. I suppose teachers must be economical with their wardrobes," or "The children look healthy, even without those costly extracurricular activities." I endured these comments, convincing myself that maintaining family ties was important for my children, despite the emotional toll. In recent months, the mistreatment had become more pronounced. Diane had just returned from a 3-week European vacation, funded by our parents as a mental health break for her. Meanwhile, I was teaching summer school to afford new school clothes for my growing children. Each week, Diane would regale everyone with stories of French cafes and Italian beaches, casting smug glances my way. My parents would glow with pride at how cultured their daughter and grandchildren were becoming, pointedly ignoring that my children had never been taken on even a modest family vacation. I had learned to swallow my pride years ago, but I never anticipated what would unfold that Sunday evening when a simple takeout order revealed just how little my family valued us. That fateful Sunday began like any other weekend day in our modest two-bedroom apartment. I woke early, despite it being my only day to sleep in, because Lily needed help with her science project due Monday, and Jason wanted to practice his reading with me. Morning sunlight filtered through our kitchen curtains as I made dinosaur-shaped pancakes, a small tradition that made our tight budget feel less limiting. "Mom, do you think Grandma will like the drawing I made for her?" Lily asked carefully, placing her artwork in a folder to keep it pristine. She had spent hours creating a family portrait, meticulously capturing details like the pattern on my mother's favorite brooch. "It's beautiful, honey. I'm sure she'll love it," I said, though privately. I worried it would end up in the drawer with my children's other artwork, which never seemed to make it onto the refrigerator. Unlike the often less impressive creations of Diane's children. By noon, I was assisting the children in preparing a homemade apple crumble to bring to dinner. My parents never expected Diane to contribute to these meals, but I was raised with the expectation that guests should always bring something. Though we were family, I always felt more like a guest in my childhood home. "Can I sprinkle the topping, Mom?" Jason asked, standing on his tiptoes to look into the mixing bowl. "Sure, buddy. Just remember how I showed you, like you're feeding little birds," I said, demonstrating the gentle motion with my fingers. As we finished, I heard a concerning noise outside. Rushing to the window, I saw fluid leaking from under my 10-year-old Honda Civic. My heart sank. Car repairs were not in this month's tight budget. "Everything okay, Mom?" Lily asked, noticing my expression. "Just a small car issue, sweetie. Nothing to worry about," I replied, forcing a smile. "Let me call Uncle Rick." My neighbor Rick, a mechanic, occasionally helped with minor car problems. 45 minutes and $100 later, Rick had patched the issue enough for us to drive to my parents' house and back, though he warned that proper repairs would be needed soon. This unexpected expense meant postponing new shoes for Lily, whose current pair was already significantly worn. By the time we got on the road, we were running 30 minutes late. I called my mother to let her know, only to be met with a sigh and a comment about reliability being a virtue. The stress headache that always preceded these family dinners was already throbbing behind my eyes. We arrived at the imposing wrought iron gates of my parents' estate at 4:45, a full 45 minutes after the requested arrival time. The circular driveway was filled with luxury vehicles, including Diane's brand new Range Rover, which I hadn't seen before. "Wow, did Aunt Diane get another new car?" Jason whispered as we carefully carried the apple crumble up the marble steps to the grand entrance. "It looks like it," I replied neutrally, not wanting to cultivate resentment in my children. Despite the knot in my stomach, I noted that Diane's previous vehicle was less than a year old. The massive oak door swung open before we could ring the bell, revealing Marjorie, my parents' longtime housekeeper, whose kind eyes offered the only genuine welcome we could expect. "They're in the main living room, Miss Anne," she said softly, taking our coats. "The mood is tense today," she added in a whisper, our long-standing code warning me to be especially cautious. As we walked through the cavernous entry hall, I noticed several large suitcases stacked near the guest wing. Before I could ponder their presence, my mother's voice rang out from the living room. "Finally decided to join us, and?" We were about to send a search party. My mother sat perched on her favorite antique settee, a crystal glass of white wine in hand, not bothering to rise for a greeting. At 63, Eleanor Wilson maintained the slim figure and perfect posture of her debutante days, her silver blonde hair expertly colored and styled weekly. "I'm sorry we're late. Car trouble," I explained, ushering my children forward. "We brought dessert." My father barely looked up from his financial newspaper. "Marjorie, take that to the kitchen," he instructed, still avoiding eye contact with us. At 65, Richard Wilson remained an imposing figure with his full head of silver hair and custom-tailored suits, worn even for family dinners. Diane lounged on the plush sofa, scrolling through her phone. "Car trouble again? Maybe if you had a reliable vehicle like a grown-up," she smirked, flipping her perfectly highlighted hair. Her children, Zach and Madison, were sprawled on the floor, playing with what appeared to be brand new tablets. "Grandma, Grandpa, we're here." Madison squealed when she finally noticed us, jumping up to run toward my parents. "Did you get me anything?" My mother immediately brightened, setting down her wine to embrace Madison. "My darling girl, I found the most beautiful doll in the hall closet from when your mother was little. Marjorie cleaned it up for you." Lily stepped forward shyly, holding out her carefully crafted drawing. "I made this for you, Grandma." My mother took the paper with 2 fingers, as if it might stain her silk blouse. "How creative." Marjorie can put it somewhere safe. The drawing was passed to the housekeeper without a second glance. I swallowed my disappointment and anger, placing a reassuring hand on Lily's shoulder as her face fell. It's beautiful, Lily. Perhaps Grandma can frame it for her office. My mother made a non-committal sound and turned her attention back to Madison, who was already unwrapping an antique porcelain doll I recognized, one I had never been allowed to touch as a child. Jason stood awkwardly by my side, watching as Zach showed off his new gaming tablet to my father, who nodded with apparent interest. A response he had never shown for Jason's science achievements. And the children look like they've outgrown their clothes again, my mother observed with a critical eye. Such a challenging age. They just keep needing new things, don't they? Before I could respond, Diane interjected. Well, some of us plan ahead for these things, Mother. Not everyone waits until their children look like they shop at thrift stores. The casual cruelty tightened my chest, but years of practice helped me maintain a neutral expression. We're doing fine, thank you, I said simply. As we settled into the uncomfortable pre-dinner conversation, I noticed more signs that something was unusual today. Diane kept mentioning that her husband, Bradley, was away on business indefinitely, repeating the detail with odd emphasis. My father seemed distracted, checking his phone frequently with a furrowed brow, and my mother, typically the perfect hostess, hadn't even offered us refreshments. After about 20 minutes of this strained interaction, my mother suddenly announced, I'm simply too exhausted to cook tonight after organizing the garden club luncheon yesterday. We'll order takeout. This was unprecedented. In 15 years of Sunday dinners, my mother had never suggested takeout, often making pointed remarks about people who couldn't be bothered to prepare proper family meals. My father nodded in agreement, excellent idea. We'll spare no expense. The children should have whatever they want, my father said, emphasizing the children while looking only at Diane's offspring, making it clear which grandchildren he meant. As Marjorie distributed drinks, fresh juice for Diane's children and tap water for mine, I felt a distinct sense that the unusual tension in the room was somehow connected to me, though I couldn't yet fathom how. Let's all gather in the living room to decide what everyone wants, my mother announced, leading us from the formal sitting room to the more spacious living area with its cathedral ceilings and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the manicured back gardens. This room, like every space in my parents' home, was impeccably decorated with priceless antiques and artwork that children were generally forbidden to touch. Diane's children, however, immediately flopped onto the cream-colored sofa with their shoes on, leaving small dirt marks that Marjorie would later quietly clean. My children perched carefully on the edge of a love seat, their posture perfect from years of being reminded not to slouch like common people. I sat beside them, already mentally calculating how much I could afford to contribute to this unexpected takeout meal without completely disrupting our weekly budget. My father pulled out a small leather notebook and gold pen from his breast pocket, items he typically used for jotting down investment ideas or contact information for important business associates. Now then, what shall we order, Eleanor? Why don't you ask the children what they'd like? My mother smiled warmly as she turned to my sister's children. Zach, Madison, what would you like for dinner tonight? Anything at all. Zach barely looked up from his tablet. I want sushi. Not the regular kind. I want the special dragon rolls with the gold flakes, like we had in Tokyo. Madison twirled her hair around her finger. I want pasta from that Italian place, the one with the truffle sauce that costs extra. And garlic bread, and tiramisu. My father dutifully wrote down their orders, nodding approvingly, excellent choices. The new Japanese restaurant downtown does offer gold leaf options, I believe. And we can certainly order from Vincenzo's for the pasta, my mother said. Diane stretched lazily on the sofa. I'll have the seared salmon with that amazing risotto from Vincenzo's and perhaps some of their imported sparkling water. My mother nodded and looked to my father. Richard, what about you? I think I'll join Zach with the sushi. Perhaps some sake as well, he replied, still writing in his notebook. As this exchange continued, I noticed my children whispering quietly to each other, trying to decide what they might order when their turn came. Lily's eyes lit up at the mention of pasta, her favorite food, but one we rarely indulged in at restaurants due to the cost. Jason was mentally debating whether he could order a hamburger, his standard choice for special occasions. I smiled encouragingly at them, thinking that despite the usual family tension, they might enjoy a special meal. Perhaps this unexpected takeout dinner would be a pleasant change from the usual formal affair, where they were constantly reminded about proper table manners and discouraged from speaking unless spoken to. After my mother finished listing her own order, an awkward silence fell over the room. My children looked expectantly at their grandparents, waiting to be asked for their preferences. I waited as well, not wanting to appear presumptuous by speaking out of turn in my parents' home, a habit deeply ingrained from childhood. The silence stretched for nearly 30 seconds before I gently prompted, Lily, Jason, what would you two like to eat? Before either child could answer, my mother's face transformed into a cold mask I knew all too well from my childhood. With a dismissive wave of her manicured hand, she stated flatly, your kids can eat whatever scraps are left in the kitchen. They're not guests here. The words hung in the air like a physical blow. I felt as though all the oxygen had been sucked from the room as I tried to process what my mother had just said. Beside me, Lily stiffened, and Jason's small hand clutched mine tightly. Before I could formulate a response, Diane let out a snort of laughter. And don't forget, and I'm staying all week. So you're covering my meals, too, she said, examining her perfect nails before adding, Bradley is traveling for work. And I simply can't bear to be alone in our house. Mother and father agreed I should stay here, and since they're covering Zach and Madison's expenses, you can handle mine. My mind raced to make sense of this bizarre situation. Why would I be covering Diane's meal expenses at our parents' house? Why were my children being told to eat kitchen scraps? What was happening? My father cleared his throat authoritatively, a sound that echoed countless childhood moments when he would pass judgment on some perceived failure of mine. Don't just sit there looking confused. Go set the table like a good little servant. That's what you're good for, isn't it? Taking care of details no one else wants to bother with. In that moment, something crystallized within me. Years of subtle and overt put-downs, financial manipulation, and watching my children be treated as less worthy than their cousins coalesced into a single point of clarity. This was not a family gathering. It was a power play designed to assert dominance before something else unfolded. The suitcases in the hallway, Diane's comments about staying the week, the unusual tension, it all suddenly made sense. I looked at my children's faces, saw the hurt and confusion in their eyes, and made a decision that would change everything. In that frozen moment, memories flooded my mind like a series of snapshots. Last Christmas, when Lily's carefully saved for presents for her grandparents were opened with forced smiles and immediately set aside, while Madison's hastily drawn card was framed on the spot. Jason's 7th birthday, when my parents arrived 3 hours late with extravagant gifts for Zach, so he wouldn't feel left out, but nothing for the birthday boy himself. Last Thanksgiving, when my mother remarked that my homemade pumpkin pie looked adequate for someone without proper culinary training, before serving store-bought desserts instead. For years, I had accepted this treatment, convincing myself it was important for my children to have a relationship with their grandparents despite the emotional toll. I had told myself that enduring humiliation was somehow noble, that turning the other cheek taught my children patience and resilience. But seeing their downcast eyes now, I realized I had been teaching them something far more damaging, that they should accept being treated as less than worthy of basic respect. With a calm that surprised even me, I reached for my children's hands. Lily, Jason, we're leaving, I said quietly but firmly. My father's head snapped up from his notebook. Don't be ridiculous, and you're overreacting, as usual. No one is leaving, my mother added with an icy smile. You always do this, make a scene over nothing. The children can have sandwiches from the kitchen. It's not as if they appreciate fine cuisine, anyway. Diane rolled her eyes dramatically. Here comes the martyr act. Poor and always so persecuted. Just accept that some people matter more than others. That's life. I stood, still holding my children's hands. No, that's your life, not ours. Not anymore. My father waved dismissively, sit down, and this childish display is embarrassing. We have important matters to discuss after dinner regarding family finances. My father's tone confirmed my suspicions that something more than the usual power dynamics was at play. But whatever crisis or scheme was unfolding, I suddenly realized I didn't care. I had spent my entire life caring too much about people who cared so little for me or my children. I'm sure you do have important matters to discuss, but they'll have to wait for another time, I replied, guiding my children toward the door. My mother's face registered genuine surprise, as if she hadn't expected me to actually leave. You can't just walk out. What about family loyalty? The irony of her statement was so profound I almost laughed. Loyalty goes both ways, Mother. As we reached the hallway, I knelt to my children's level. Go get your jackets, please. We're going to have a special dinner somewhere else tonight. Their eyes widened with confusion but also relief. Are you sure, Mom? Lily whispered. Grandma seems really mad. I'm very sure, sweetheart. We deserve to be treated with respect. And if we can't find that here, we'll go somewhere else. As the children went to retrieve their jackets from Marjorie, who hovered nearby with a sympathetic expression, Diane appeared in the hallway doorway. You know, they only invited you today because they need something from you, she said, her voice laced with a strange mix of spite and what almost sounded like envy. They were going to ask you to let me and the kids stay at your place for a while. But I told them you'd never agree unless they broke you down first. The pieces clicked into place. Stay at my place? Why would you need to stay with me? Diane examined her manicured nails, avoiding eye contact. Just some temporary financial adjustments. Bradley's company is restructuring. It's not serious, Diane said. Before I could process this revelation, my father appeared behind her. And, stop this nonsense immediately. Your sister needs your help, and as family, you're obligated to provide it. My two-bedroom apartment, which you've repeatedly called a depressing shoebox, is suddenly acceptable housing for Diane and her children. I asked, the absurdity of the situation becoming clearer by the moment. It's only for a few months until we sort out some investment matters, my father replied stiffly. Your sister has certain standards of living that need to be maintained. And my children? What are their standards of living worth to this family? My mother appeared, completing the wall of disapproval facing me. You're being selfish, and your sister is in a delicate position right now. Lily and Jason returned with their jackets, standing close to me as they sensed the tension. I placed protective hands on their shoulders. We're leaving now. If you want to discuss Diane staying with us, you can call tomorrow and ask properly, with the respect you'd show any other adult you're asking for significant help. Diane snorted. She's actually leaving. I told you she's become difficult since the divorce. As we turned toward the door, my father called out, if you leave now, don't expect our help when you inevitably need it. Family loyalty isn't something you can just dismiss when it's inconvenient. I paused, looking back at the three of them, united in their entitlement and condescension. I've never received your help when I needed it, not when Thomas left, not when I needed childcare to keep my job, not when Lily needed braces. What I've received is judgment, criticism, and constant reminders that we're somehow less valuable than the rest of this family. That ends tonight. With that, I guided my children outside, ignoring the continued protests behind us. As we walked to the car, Jason looked up at me with wide eyes. Are we in trouble, Mom? I gently squeezed his hand. No, sweetheart. I think we're finally out of trouble. As we drove away from the mansion, a strange lightness settled over me despite the uncertainty ahead. Glancing at my children in the rearview mirror, I saw their confused but relieved expressions and made a spontaneous decision. How would you two feel about having dinner at Morton's Steakhouse tonight? Their gasps of excitement told me all I needed to know. Morton's was the kind of upscale restaurant we drove past but never entered, where a single meal cost more than our weekly grocery budget. But tonight, it felt essential to make a statement, not to my family, but to my children and myself. We were worth more than scraps from anyone's kitchen. Morton's Steakhouse glowed as an elegant oasis of warm golden light amid the downtown evening shadows. The valet raised his eyebrows slightly at our modest Honda but opened our doors with the same flourish he'd given the Mercedes ahead of us. I handed him the keys with a tip smaller than customary but all I could afford. Welcome to Morton's, the hostess greeted. Her professional smile wavering only briefly as she took in our casual Sunday attire amid a sea of business suits and cocktail dresses. Do you have a reservation? No, I'm afraid we don't, I admitted, suddenly wondering if this impulsive decision would end in disappointment. To my surprise, the hostess checked her tablet and nodded. We had a cancellation. We can seat you in about 15 minutes if that works for you. Relief must have shown on my face. That would be perfect. Thank you. As we waited in the luxurious lobby, Lily tugged at my sleeve. Mom, can we really eat here? Isn't it super expensive? I knelt to her level, meeting her concerned eyes. Tonight is special, sweetie. Sometimes we need to remind ourselves of our own worth, and this is one of those times. Jason's eyes widened, taking in the dark wood paneling and crystal chandeliers. This place is fancy, he whispered in awe. Do they have hamburgers? I laughed softly. They probably do, and you can order whatever you want tonight. When we were seated at a table draped in crisp white linen, a waiter promptly appeared with leather-bound menus and a genuine smile. Good evening. My name is Anthony, and I'll be taking care of you tonight. Can I start you with something to drink? The children ordered sodas, a rare treat in our household, while I splurged on a glass of wine, something I rarely did due to cost and the need to stay clear-headed as a single parent. When Anthony returned with our drinks, we placed our orders. Jason chose a hamburger, elevated with aged cheddar and truffle aioli. Lily selected grilled salmon with roasted vegetables, while I opted for a modestly priced chicken dish, still mindful of costs despite my earlier resolve. As Anthony left with our orders, Lily looked at me with searching eyes. Are Grandma and Grandpa mad at us now? I took a sip of my wine, considering my response. They're probably upset, yes, but being upset doesn't give anyone the right to treat others unkindly. Why did Grandma say we should eat scraps? Jason asked, his young face creased with confusion. Did we do something wrong? My heart ached at his question, at the thought that he might believe he deserved such treatment. No, sweetheart. You did absolutely nothing wrong. Sometimes adults have complicated feelings that make them say unkind things, but that reflects on them, not on you. Is Aunt Diane really going to live with us? Lily asked, concern evident in her voice. Our apartment is so small, and Zach and Madison aren't very nice to our things. I reached across the table to squeeze her hand. No, honey. We won't be having house guests anytime soon. Our home is our safe place, and we get to decide who comes into it. As our conversation continued, I watched my children gradually relax. Their shoulders easing from their defensive posture, their smiles growing more genuine. They began chatting about school and friends, the earlier tension dissolving in this unexpected luxury. When our food arrived, beautifully plated and in portions generous enough to ensure leftovers, both children's eyes widened. This is the biggest hamburger I've ever seen, Jason exclaimed. My salmon has flowers on it. Lily marveled, pointing to the edible garnish. We savored every bite, the exceptional quality making even familiar foods taste extraordinary. As I watched my children enjoy this rare treat, I realized I had never truly stood up for them before. I had taught them to tolerate disrespect, to accept less than they deserved, all in the name of preserving family connections that were toxic at their core. I need to use the restroom, I told them after we finished our main courses. I'll be right back. Would you like to look at the dessert menu while I'm gone? Their enthusiastic nods made me smile as I made my way across the restaurant. Inside the elegant restroom, I pulled out my phone and stared at it for a long moment before making a call I should have made years ago. The phone rang 3 times before a familiar voice answered. And, is that you, dear? Hello, Godmother Patricia, I said, my voice catching slightly. I hope I'm not calling too late. Patricia Montgomery, my mother's college roommate and once her closest friend before a falling out decades ago that neither ever fully explained, had remained my godmother despite the rift, sending birthday cards and graduation gifts, though my parents discouraged close contact. At 72, Patricia was widowed, childless, and, according to family gossip, extremely wealthy from her late husband's technology investments. It's never too late to hear from you, dear. Though I admit I'm surprised. Is everything all right? You sound upset. Her warm concern broke through the emotional walls I had maintained all evening. In a rush of words, I explained everything, from years of subtle mistreatment to tonight's blatant cruelty. I told her about my children being told to eat scraps, Diane's apparent financial troubles, and my father's manipulative tactics. When I finished, there was a long pause, and for a moment, I feared I had overstepped by unburdening myself to someone I hadn't spoken to in years. I've been waiting for this call for a very long time, Patricia finally said, her voice both sad and resolute. I always wondered when you'd reach your breaking point with them. You knew? I asked, surprised. Of course I knew. Why do you think Eleanor and I had our falling out? I confronted her about how she treated you when you were just a child. Richard was already showing such blatant favoritism toward Diane, and I told Eleanor she needed to be the counterbalance to ensure you felt equally loved. She accused me of interfering in her parenting and told me never to mention it again if I wanted to remain in your life at all. I leaned against the marble counter, absorbing this revelation. I never knew. Your mother made it clear that if I ever told you, I'd be cut off from seeing you entirely, so I stayed on the periphery, sending gifts, watching from a distance, hoping you'd eventually see the truth for yourself. And now I have, I said quietly. And now you have, she agreed. So, what happens next, my dear? I took a deep breath. I don't know. I just walked out on my family. Diane apparently needs a place to stay, which suggests they're having financial problems they haven't disclosed. My car needs repairs I can't really afford, and I just brought my children to Morton's Steakhouse, of all places. Patricia's laugh was warm and genuine. Good for you. A perfect choice for your declaration of independence. A declaration I can't afford, I admitted ruefully. And, I need to tell you something. I've always planned to leave you a significant inheritance. Your mother knows this, which is likely another reason she's kept you tethered to the family despite the emotional cost. But I see no reason to wait until I'm gone for you to benefit from my resources. Patricia, I didn't call to ask for money, I protested, horrified at the thought that she might think that was my motivation. I know you didn't. That's precisely why I want to help you. I have more money than I could spend in several lifetimes and no direct heirs. I'd like to set up a trust for you and the children immediately, not after my death. My head spun with the implications. I don't know what to say. Say yes, and then listen carefully because there's something else you should know about your parents' current situation, something that explains Diane's sudden need for housing. For the next 5 minutes, Patricia shared information that made me grip the counter for support. Apparently, my father's business had been struggling for years, a fact he'd hidden from nearly everyone. Recent bad investments had pushed them to the brink of insolvency. The mansion had been remortgaged several times, with Patricia herself holding the most recent loan after banks refused further financing. "They're 3 months behind on payments to me," she explained. "I haven't pursued it because I was waiting to see how they'd handle the situation. Whether they'd finally treat you as an equal family member when they needed help. Tonight's behavior answers that question definitively." When I returned to the table, I found my children happily sharing a massive chocolate dessert, their faces alight with sugar-induced joy. My phone had begun buzzing repeatedly in my purse, my parents' and sister's names flashing on the screen. I silenced it without answering. "Is everything okay, Mom?" Lily asked, perceptive as always. I smiled, feeling a genuine lightness I hadn't experienced in years. "Everything is better than okay, sweetheart. I think things are about to change for us in some very good ways." After paying the bill, which caused only a momentary pang of financial anxiety now that I knew help was coming, we drove home to our small apartment. The entire way, my phone continued to buzz with calls and text messages that I ignored. Whatever crisis was unfolding at my parents' house could wait until tomorrow. Tonight was for my children, for rebuilding what had been damaged by years of accepting less than we deserved. Tonight was the beginning of something new. We arrived home to our modest apartment building just after 9 p.m., the children chattering excitedly about their unexpected fine dining experience. Our second-floor walk-up had never felt more like a sanctuary than it did that night, its smallness suddenly cozy rather than cramped, its simplicity honest rather than lacking. "Can we watch a movie before bed, Mom?" Jason asked, still riding the high of our unusual evening. On a normal Sunday, I would have insisted on an early bedtime to prepare for the school week ahead. But nothing about this day had been normal, and I found myself nodding. "One short one. You pick." As the children settled on our worn but comfortable sofa with a Disney film, I finally checked my phone. 27 missed calls and 43 text messages awaited, their urgency practically radiating from the screen. The texts revealed a story of escalating panic. From my mother, and "Stop this childish behavior and come back immediately." From my father, "Your sister needs your help. This is a family matter." From Diane, "You always were selfish. Mother and father are furious." As time passed, the tone shifted dramatically. From my mother, "Please call us back. We need to discuss important matters." From my father, and "This is urgent. Financial situation requires family discussion." From Diane, "Look, I'm sorry about the kitchen scraps comment. Just call back." The most recent messages were telling. From my mother, "Patricia called us. Please, we need to talk." From my father, "Whatever Patricia told you, we can explain. Don't make any decisions yet." From Diane, "Are you really going to let Patricia Montgomery turn you against your own family after everything we've done for you?" I nearly laughed at that last one, the audacity of claiming they'd done anything for me when the reality was quite the opposite. I silenced my phone again and joined my children for the movie, deciding the unfolding drama could wait until morning. After tucking the children into bed with extra hugs and reassurances that they'd done nothing wrong at their grandparents' house, I prepared for the week ahead, laying out school clothes and packing lunches as I always did on Sunday nights. The routine was comforting, a reminder that despite the emotional upheaval of the evening, our daily life would continue. I slept surprisingly well and woke early to call the school, requesting a rare personal day. The principal, aware of my impeccable attendance record, readily agreed. Next, I called my neighbor Sandra, who occasionally watched my children after school, and arranged for her to take them for the day. At 9 a.m. sharp, there was a knock at my apartment door. Patricia stood there, elegant in a simple navy pantsuit, her silver hair styled in a classic bob. Behind her stood a serious-looking man carrying a leather briefcase. "Good morning, my dear," she greeted me with a warm hug. "This is Mr. Greenberg, my attorney. I hope you don't mind that I brought him, but after our conversation last night, I thought it prudent to formalize certain arrangements immediately." We settled at my small kitchen table with coffee, the attorney efficiently arranging documents beside him. Patricia explained that she had called my parents after our conversation, informing them she would accelerate the timeline on certain financial matters. "The mortgage on their property is now officially in default," she said. "Normally, this would trigger a lengthy foreclosure process. But there's a clause in our agreement that accelerates the timeline in case of," she glanced at her attorney, who supplied the term, "material adverse change in financial condition." Mr. Greenberg cleared his throat. "In simple terms, Mrs. Montgomery has the legal right to call the entire loan due immediately, based on information about other debts and financial misrepresentations that have recently come to light." I stared at them, trying to process the implications. "Are you saying my parents could lose their house?" Patricia patted my hand gently. "They were going to lose it anyway, and Richard's business has been operating in the red for nearly 3 years. He's been borrowing increasingly desperate sums at exorbitant interest rates to maintain appearances. Diane's husband, Bradley, didn't leave on a business trip. He left her after discovering she had secretly remortgaged their home to pay off credit card debt. Their house is in foreclosure, which is why she needed somewhere to stay. My head spun with these revelations. The perfect, wealthy family I had always felt inferior to was a crumbling facade, pristine only in appearance. What does this mean for them? For us? I asked. Mr. Greenberg slid a document toward me. Mrs. Montgomery would like to establish a trust for you and your children. The initial funding would be $5 million, with provisions for educational expenses, housing, and health care. You would serve as trustee with full discretionary power over distributions. I nearly choked on my coffee. $5 million? Patricia smiled. A small portion of what you'll eventually inherit, but enough to secure your independence immediately. There's also a provision for purchasing a new home, should you wish to relocate. As I tried to absorb this life-changing offer, another knock came at the door, more like insistent pounding. I opened it to find my entire family standing there, my father, disheveled without his usual suit jacket. My mother, her hair uncharacteristically unstyled. Diane, red-eyed and wearing what appeared to be yesterday's clothes. And her children, looking confused and cranky. We need to talk, my father said without preamble, attempting to push past me into the apartment. I stood firm in the doorway. This is not a good time. My mother peered past me, her eyes widening at the sight of Patricia and the attorney at my kitchen table. So it's true. You've aligned yourself with her against your own family. Patricia rose and approached the door. Eleanor, Richard, Diane. What a surprise. I was just explaining to and the new financial arrangements I've made for her and her children. My father's face flushed a deep red. This is a family matter, Patricia. You have no right to interfere. I gained that right when you mortgaged your property to me, Richard, Patricia replied coolly. And when you defaulted on our agreement. Diane pushed forward, her composure cracking. And, you have to help us. They're going to take everything. Where are my children supposed to live? For the first time, I truly saw my sister, beyond her polished exterior, as a panicked woman. Despite everything, I felt a pang of sympathy, not for her, but for her children, who were innocent in all this. Perhaps we should all come inside and discuss this civilly, I suggested, stepping back to allow them entry. The children can watch TV in the bedroom while we talk. Once Zach and Madison were settled with Jason's tablet in the bedroom. The adults gathered in my small living room, an uncomfortable tableau of family dysfunction. My father immediately launched into accusations about Patricia's underhanded tactics and my betrayal, while my mother dabbed at her eyes with a monogrammed handkerchief. I held up my hand, silencing his tirade. Before we go any further, I want to understand exactly what's been happening. No more lies. No more manipulation. Over the next hour, the truth emerged in fragments, each revelation more surprising than the last. My father's real estate empire had been faltering for years, propped up by increasingly risky investments that had finally collapsed. Diane's husband had left her after discovering she had accumulated over $500,000 in secret credit card debt. My parents had planned to ask me to house Diane and her children indefinitely while they tried to salvage what remained of their assets. We were going to compensate you, of course, my father insisted, though the details of this supposed compensation remained conveniently vague. By treating my children like servants and telling them to eat scraps. I asked, unable to keep the edge from my voice. My mother had the grace to look embarrassed. That was unfortunate phrasing. The stress of the situation has been enormous. Stress doesn't make you tell children they're not worthy of the same meal as their cousins, Patricia interjected firmly. It simply reveals what you truly think of them. As the conversation continued, it became clear that my family hadn't come to apologize but to secure my help on their terms. They expected access to whatever financial assistance Patricia provided me, presenting it as their due for years of including me and my children in family gatherings. After listening to their expectations and demands, I took a deep breath and spoke from my heart. I'm willing to help, but on my terms, not yours. Diane and her children can stay with me for 2 weeks while they find suitable housing. During that time, they will treat my home and my children with respect. After that, I'll help you find affordable housing and connect you with financial counseling services. My father's face darkened with anger. You can't be serious. 2 weeks? Financial counseling? Do you have any idea who you're talking to? Yes, I said calmly. I'm talking to family members who need my help but have never shown me or my children basic respect. That changes now, or there will be no help at all. For the first time in my life, I watched my father rendered speechless. My mother looked as though she might faint from the shock of being addressed this way. Diane stared at me with a mixture of resentment and dawning respect. Those are my boundaries, I continued. You can accept them or leave, but they are not negotiable. In that moment, looking at their faces, I realized a profound truth. their power over me had always been an illusion, sustained by my own need for approval and acceptance. Now that I no longer sought either, that power had evaporated like morning mist. 6 months can change everything. As I sit on the deck of my new home, watching my children play in the spacious backyard with their cousins, it's hard to believe how drastically our lives have transformed since that fateful Sunday dinner. The first few weeks after the confrontation were challenging but necessary. True to my word, I allowed Diane and her children to stay in our small apartment temporarily. The close quarters forced conversations that should have happened years ago, piercing the veil of pretense that had separated us as sisters. One night, after the children were asleep, Diane broke down and admitted how much she had resented my independence, beneath her designer clothes and perfect makeup. Diane confessed tearfully, she had always felt like a hollow shell, defined entirely by our parents' expectations and financial support. "You built your own life," she said. "I never learned how." That conversation marked the beginning of a fragile new understanding between us, not instant friendship, but a mutual respect that had never existed before. With Patricia's help, I purchased a comfortable 4-bedroom house in a good school district, complete with a garden for the children to play in and space for me to start a small educational consulting business on the side. The trust she established ensured that Lily and Jason would never worry about college tuition or medical expenses, lifting an immense burden I had carried since their birth. My parents downsized dramatically, moving from their mansion to a modest condominium. The transition was difficult, especially for my mother, who struggled with the loss of her social standing. Yet, over the months, I noticed subtle changes in them. My father, forced to retire when his business collapsed, discovered an unexpected passion for woodworking. My mother, initially lost without her staff and expansive home to manage, gradually found purpose in community volunteer work that gave her a sense of meaning beyond appearances. Diane secured an apartment within her new budget and, for the first time in her adult life, took a job at a boutique clothing store. The work suited her natural eye for fashion and social skills, and though the salary was modest compared to her former lifestyle, I occasionally glimpsed genuine pride when she spoke of a successful day or a customer she had helped. Most importantly, the dynamics among the children shifted profoundly. Without the toxic atmosphere of comparison and favoritism, all 4 cousins began to develop genuine friendships. Zach and Madison, initially resentful of their reduced circumstances, gradually adapted and even seemed relieved by the clearer expectations in their new lives. Weekly family therapy sessions, another condition I insisted upon for my continued involvement, helped us navigate the complex emotions and patterns that had long defined our relationships. Our therapist, Dr. Gabrielle Winters, skillfully guided us through difficult conversations about hurt, expectations, and the possibility of forgiveness without forgetting. "Boundaries are not walls," she reminded us in a recent session, "they are fences with gates that you control. You decide when to open them and how much access to allow." This wisdom helped me maintain a delicate balance between compassion for my family's situation and protecting my own emotional well-being. I could offer help without sacrificing my self-respect or my children's sense of worth. Patricia became a regular presence in our lives, the grandmother figure my children had always deserved. Her wisdom, humor, and unconditional support healed wounds I hadn't even realized I carried. "Sometimes the family we need isn't the one we're born into," she told me once as we watched the children play. "Sometimes we have to create it for ourselves." One Sunday evening, almost exactly 6 months after the takeout incident, I hosted a family dinner at my new home. As everyone gathered around my dining table, the contrast with our previous Sunday traditions couldn't have been more striking. The conversation flowed naturally, free from the undercurrents of judgment and competition that had once tainted every interaction. When Lily proudly displayed her latest art project, my mother actually studied it carefully before offering specific, genuine praise. Later, as I cleared the dishes, my father approached me awkwardly. "You have a lovely home, Anne," he said, his voice carrying an unfamiliar note of humility. "And you've done a remarkable job with your children." Coming from him, this simple acknowledgement meant more than any grand gesture could. "Thank you, Dad," I replied, accepting the olive branch for what it was, not an apology for decades of favoritism, but perhaps the beginning of something new. The journey hasn't been perfect. Old habits resurface, especially under stress. Diane occasionally slips into entitlement. My mother sometimes makes insensitive comparisons. And my father still struggles to show interest in my children's achievements, yet now, these behaviors are addressed openly rather than silently endured. Through this experience, I've learned that sometimes the hardest moments become gateways to a better life. Standing up for yourself and your children isn't selfish, it's essential. Teaching others how to treat you requires courage but brings freedom. Most importantly, I've realized it's never too late to rewrite your family's story, to break toxic patterns that have persisted for generations. Each time I see my children stand taller and speak more confidently, I know that, regardless of future challenges, we've already won the most important battle. If you're watching this and grappling with similar family dynamics, know that you deserve respect and kindness. Setting boundaries isn't about punishing others. It's about protecting yourself and those you love. Sometimes, the bravest act is walking away from a table where love comes with conditions and finding one where everyone is equally nourished. I'd love to hear your stories of confronting family toxicity or setting boundaries that transformed your relationships. Please leave a comment below sharing your experience or any questions you have. If this story resonated with you, give it a like and subscribe to hear more journeys of healing and transformation. Sharing these stories helps others know they're not alone, so please hit the share button if you know someone who might need this message today. Thank you for listening, and may you find the courage to create the family life you truly deserve, whether with the family you were born into or the one you choose to create.